In this video, I am walking you through my mindset when I'm doing my functional tests with my clients. So the functional test aspect of an appointment with me is when I get you doing movements and I'm watching how your body can do the movement, and I'm also assessing what your body tells us about how you find the movement. So are you in pain? Do you feel a stretch? What do you feel working? Etc. So I'm going to just kind of slowly walk you through an example of what it is that I'm looking for when I have my clients having an appointment with me, how my mind works. Nothing is conclusive, so I'm constantly drawing up hypothesi, and I'm changing my mind, but I'm trying to come up with ideas, and then I'm basically testing them to see whether they make sense or not. So the first one I'm going to show you is me deciding where somebody's restriction lies. So is this person restricted in their pelvis, or is it somewhere else that's actually potentially the root cause of the problem? So I've got my model here, and model, I would like you, without doing anything different to kind of adjust yourself, I just want you to bend over to touch the floor as you would do naturally, but don't do anything to adjust yourself. Okay, great. So what you can see here is that in order for him to pivot forward down into the ground, he's put his hips backwards, further behind his ankles. So he's got this kind of diagonal line shoving his hip backwards, and that tells us something. His hips don't want to lay directly over his ankles like they should do. They're shoving backwards. There's some restriction going on. We've got to find out what it is. So first things first, hips have gone back. Next thing you can see here, sorry, I'm just going to unveil your body slightly. So you can see here that he's quite rounded through this lower part of his back. He definitely could be worse. Believe me, there are people that are a lot more sort of sticky than my model is, but he is a bit rounded here. He's not quite hinging properly from his hips and having that nice straight spine like we want to. Next thing, model, I'd like you to try and do is what happens when you shift your weight forward. So when you try and bring your weight more into your toes so that your hips are over your ankles, how does that feel?
Good.
Does it feel like harder work?
For my hamstrings, yes.
For your hamstrings. So when you shift your weight forward, you're feeling more of a stretch down the back of your legs.
Yes.
So when he shifts his weight forwards, he's feeling more of a stretch down the back of his legs. So that's telling us that what his body was doing is his body was trying to run out from feeling that stretch exactly where we wanted him to feel it. He's now corrected that position. You see that he's bending his knees a little bit more to compensate because he's not able to do both at the same time. And he still has this rounding through his lower back. So I can tell that there are some things going on. But is it his pelvis that's the problem, or is it something lower down that's the issue? So that's where the next part of the functional movement test will come into it. So model, if you can please come to hands and knees for me. And I'm just going to make sure, yeah, that's perfect, you're in the camera. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to leave your body exposed. So what I would like you to do again, without any instruction from me, is I'd just like you to move through cat-cow position a bunch of times. So now I'm asking him to do a movement, called cat-cow, cats and dogs, depending on whether or not you're yoga or a goscue. I am both. And what I'm looking for here is the movement of his pelvis and his spine. So you can see here that he has no difficulty when you get back up to flexion. Can you pause there for me? So come up. So when he's here in this flexion position, he has absolutely no problem with the flexion. You know, his pelvis is moving very well here. The whole spine is really well rounded. So he's very able to perform this range of movement. And then if you could go the other way, and you can see here he's rolling down from his pelvis, and this is what we call extension. He's somewhat limited in this range of movement, so he could have some more sort of pivoting forward at his hips. I would want there to be a little bit more of an arch in his lower back. There could be a bit more movement here, but all things considered, his range of movement at his pelvis is okay. And you can see here that what's happening at his pelvis was quite different to how his pelvis looked when he was standing upright. So Ben, can you just recreate how your pelvis looked when you were standing? So just if you sort of, as in like that. So when he was standing upwards and I was asking for him to lean forward, he had this rounding through his lower back because his pelvis wasn't able to tilt forward properly into what we call sort of full extension with a hip hinge, which should have looked more like this when he was standing up. So what I'm thinking now is actually when we break this movement down into its component parts, his pelvis is able to hinge backwards and forwards. There could be more of a range of movement, but actually he is able to get his spine in extension and his pelvis in extension. He's able to move it both ways. So what that indicates to me is that the restriction is not his pelvis, because we're asking his pelvis to move now. What's not involved in this movement that was involved in the last movement that we did? And the answer is his feet. So in that last exercise, just like the hanging forward, the standing forward, the difference with that exercise and this one is he was standing up on his feet. So restriction that is occurring at his ankle is, and his calf is tight, and it's that tightness at the bottom of his leg, which is then pulling on his hamstring, and it's meaning that he can't get that pivot forward through his pelvis area. So whilst I would, if he was a client of mine, I would want to give him a little bit of more work to mobilise his pelvis a bit more. My major focus would be on getting his calves stretched out so that that posterior chain, the back chain of muscles at the back of his body, is a bit more loose, is a bit more functional, and therefore he would be able to get that tilt forward at the pelvis. So I'm not sure if that made too much sense, but hopefully it did. You can kind of hopefully see where my mind is going. I'm looking at how you move, I'm assessing what doesn't work, and then when I see things that don't work, I'm breaking your body out into little pieces to figure out which part of that bigger movement can't your body achieve. And it's by finding these bits that can't do the movement properly, the feet rather than the pelvis, by finding those bits that can't do the movement properly, that's where you'll get rid of your pain, because you'll start waking up these areas and you'll realise how when they start working, your body just starts flowing better and things start biomechanically gelling as they should do, and pain will go down.